Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
With your host, certified Cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura Vosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
Today's guest is Janet Raye Stevens.
So sit back,
pop a cold one,
and dive into some books
and brews.
The watch is going. So, everybody out there, welcome to Books and Brews episode 40.
The big 4-0.
The big 4-0. I feel older already.
I know, we should have like the black balloons over the hill.
How are you, Laura? I feel like I say something more than that at the beginning, but I don't. I just say welcome to episode whatever.
Spend this month thinking about it.
Okay.
Coming up with something really clever, but we have a pattern and it works. So I think the most important thing this month, is to totally show off the sixth grade girl nail polish here. I had some fun yesterday, so that really dates when we're recording this. We were at the dollar store, and all of a sudden I was like, wait, I can get red, white, and blue nail polish for $1 a piece. So I was sitting there in the car trying to do it while the car was lurching, and eventually I went, this is like that episode or that scene in Airplane where she's trying to put on the makeup as the plane's crashing. I said, maybe I should wait for a red light.
So for everyone out there, if you're watching on the outtakes on YouTube, you can see this. But if you're just listening out there, Laura and I are in the same room.
Yes, this
sitting right next to each other.
2 years.
2 years.
Wow.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's like the olden days.
Yeah, except that you're not in the room with us.
Yes. Yeah, you're before the COVID.
Right.
The writer was in the same room, sitting right here at my dining room table, just like Laura and I are right now.
And I was having a few beers.
Yeah, I was just talking about that with Chris this morning and saying, I really like doing it in person, but this has also opened us up that we can interview people from New England. We've interviewed, I think, some people from overseas, haven't we?
I think so.
Yeah,
we did, because there was somebody who joined us in the middle of the night for them.
Right. Yeah. Or, we can now interview people from all over the world. Yeah. So, my month has been interesting. We went to Bayfield and we did some sailing and we had great mussels. Anyone who goes to Bayfield, Wisconsin, go to the Bayfield Inn. Eat their mussels. They will not serve them on the rooftop because we ruined it for everyone. It's not on the rooftop menu, but one night we went there and we're like, we had them last night and they were so good. Will you please? And the chef was so flattered that he served us mussels. And we came back like 3 nights later. We're like, can we get mussels again? And they went, no, now everybody wants mussels on the rooftop. He won't do it. I'm like, oh. So that's been our month, but your month has been much better than mine.
My month was very interesting in that I got married.
So congratulations!
Now a thing that I never thought I would say. So you showed off your nail polish. So I'm going to show off my wedding ring.
Yeah.
That my wife Masako made. She made our rings. They are identical,
except for size. Yep.
And then so we got married and had a lovely ceremony that we tried to do to Zoom, but the audio didn't work. And then we went to Vancouver and Washington State and had a lovely week-long honeymoon.
So I have to ask, was that Vancouver, Canada, or
Canada.
Vancouver,
Washington? British Columbia.
Okay, so you went to Vancouver, Canada, and to Washington State.
And Washington State.
What part of Washington State did you go to?
Orcas Island.
Oh.
Which was gorgeous.
Yes.
And then we had an afternoon in Seattle.
Okay, nice. What did you do there? Did you go up in the Space Needle?
No. What did we do? We went to Pike Place Market, which was awful.
Awful. Why?
It's so crowded and so touristy. And
I used to play my flute there. And by used to, I mean I did it twice and got some money in my hat.
Although I will say, so one of the great things, so a large percent of the population in Vancouver is Asian, and Masako is Japanese. And so just there is so much great Asian food in Vancouver. So we ate all of the Asian food, and Masako
no
was
left.
in heaven. And then we get to Seattle, and she liked the Pike Place Market better than I did, but I'm miserable in the market, and there's a brewery there, so I'm like, let's get beer because I got to get out of this. So that we enjoyed some mediocre beers, and then we start looking for where we want to go to dinner. And we decided we wanted sushi because we started the honeymoon with really bad sushi in Vancouver. And we wanted good sushi, and we figured we could get that in Seattle. And so we look, and there's a restaurant right down the street. Now, I don't know if anybody is familiar with the documentary Jiro Dreams of Sushi. If you're not, you should watch it. Great movie about like sushi master in Japan. And the chef at this sushi restaurant trained under Jiro. And so it was, without question, the best sushi I've ever had. Masako said most of it was the best sushi she'd ever had, but a couple of pieces she had issues.
Not so much.
My accolades. I just had the thing with the tentacles, octopus. And it was not quite what I was expecting. I was expecting the octopus balls. I know. I was trying to think what else I could call it.
The head?
No. Where they prepare the octopus in little dough balls.
Oh, okay.
I thought you were going to say something else, like that's not how they reproduce.
Well, I was thinking it.
You were trying to keep it PG. I was just waiting for it.
We have a clean rating.
We do. We're trying to keep
Apple,
it. I just don't know what they're called, but they're in the little dough. And I was expecting that, and I got just slabs of octopus where you could see where the little tentacle suction cups. And I was like,
That's how it's normally served.
Yeah, well, I liked it. I've had them many times, and I love them. They're really good. It's like baked in dough or something like that, or not dough, but what do you call the I'm losing my grasp on language. The pot sticker stuff. What's the stuff that's around?
Like dumplings.
Yeah, like dumplings. It's like octopus dumplings. That's the word I should have used to keep us at G. You have to look for it. Yeah, so I'm assuming you didn't get a whole lot of reading.
I didn't read it.
I read 4 books. You can pick 2 of them
right.
and claim them as your own. So 2 of them where we talked about them last month, the Karen Robards, but I finished one, and it's about a woman who gets sucked into pursuing serial killers with the FBI. And the twist is that she can see dead people. So I read 2 of those, but then I thought it was really interesting just by dumb luck. The other 2 kind of connected with last month's author and this month's author. So the one I'm reading is called, let's see if I can read my typing, The Soul's Guide in Search of Character and Calling by James Hillman. And I thought this was really interesting because last month's authors were Jody and Janelle Maloney. Jody Decker and Janelle Maloney, mother and daughter, and their book was about their great-grandmother who was in an asylum. And so as I was reading, this quote jumped out at me that case history demonstrates more what's wrong with psychology than with its cases. And I thought that was just so absolutely perfect for Martha Nash, who, as we remember, was instituted because she kept complaining that she couldn't taste, and which was probably the result of being intubated for surgery. And yet they called her crazy. Yeah. So I thought that was a really neat quote. And then I'm also reading, this is, I never ever thought I would be the person to be interested in military history, but this is fascinating. It's called The Rape of Nanking. And it's an incident that very few people know about. There's a fantastic movie called Flowers of War that everybody should see, no questions asked. Like you said to me once about beer, if you don't want to see this movie, or if you don't like this movie, you're wrong. You're just wrong. But anyway, the reason I found it interesting was because it is set in China's World War II, which started earlier than America's World War II. And so this month we have an author whose books are set in World War II.
Indeed we do. And who is that author?
Let me see. I forgot to put this in like 15-point font. Meet award-winning author Janet Raye Stevens, mom, reader, tea drinker, okay, tea guzzler, and weaver of smart, stealthily romantic tales. A Derringer Award finalist, Janet's work has been recognized multiple times, including winning the Daphne du Maurier, hopefully I said that right, award for the World War II set Paranormal, A Moment After Dark, and RWA's Golden Heart Award for the fun and filthy, I'm sorry, I need stronger glasses.
Oh my.
Octopus dumplings. I'm sorry, for the fun and flirty holiday romance. I can't believe I said that.
That is the cleanest book I have ever written. So it's not filthy at all.
Not filthy at all. The fun and flirty and not filthy holiday romance, Cold for Christmas. Janet writes mystery, time travel, paranormal, and the occasional Christmas romance with humor, heart, and a dash of suspense. She lives in New England with her husband, who's practically perfect in every way, and their various family members, all geniuses and good looking to boot. So did you by any chance come from the Lake Wobegon area?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Yeah, so welcome, Janet. And
Thank you.
Michael, I think that means we are ready for our first
That does
beer.
mean we are ready for the first beer. So I got to say, these three readings we have today, this is a session all about lagers, because all these stories just said lager to me totally, and old lagers, old school lagers. So the first one is from Fulton Brewing here in Minneapolis. It's called Northern Standard Amber Lager.
Nice.
I came up with this because of descriptions of a rooming house in this reading. And it just brought forth for me like images of faded black and white photos from the 40s, like women dressed in, 40s fashion. And it just brought all this kind of nostalgia, but it was also warm. It felt warm to me. And so I wanted an amber lager, such as might have been drunk back then. It's a little bit maltier, a little bit warmer. You're not going to like it.
You
but
promised
if you
me.
like any of them, this is the one.
Okay.
It's a
Start
little
off
bit
on a high
warmer, a
note.
little bit maltier, rounder mouth feel than some of the pale lagers. And so it just felt appropriate to me. So cheers.
Cheers.
We can actually clink.
Excellent.
Right. Yeah, I
there
have
is-
to take the clink.
There is a lot of beer drinking going on in my first book, Beryl Blue Time Cup. A lot of beer drinking, so this is very appropriate.
And
It's I think I could get used to it.
yeah,
I think this is the kind of thing years ago, every once in a while, I would have a beer just because it was a really hot day and I was sick of water and I was sick of lemonade and I was sick of any other cold drink, and I'd have a beer and I'd be like, oh, okay, it's I can see this being okay on a hot day.
Yeah.
So that's seems like the highest praise the beer is going to get today from me.
Like I said, of
It'll
the three, this is the one that
We'll
you were
see.
most likely to.
Have I ever surprised you in liking something you thought I wouldn't?
No.
I didn't think so. You call it every time. But see, now I only have one glass, so I might have to finish that regardless.
Mm.
We're ready for reading number one.
All righty. So shall I set it up?
Sure.
This reading is from Beryl Blue Time Cup, which is a World War II set time travel adventure set in the US. Feisty librarian Beryl Blue is hurled from 2015 to World War II home front, tasked with stopping an assassin determined to change history by killing a seemingly random soldier on leave. Told she's the only person in all of time who can keep sexy, stubborn Army Sergeant Tom Sully Sullivan safe, Beryl sets about to complete her mission to stop a killer, protect a man who refuses to be protected, and keep her heart intact. I had a lot of fun with this book. The first excerpt is takes place about a third of the way into the book, so Beryl's already been hurtled back in time. And here's the setup. Beryl connects with Sergeant Sully, the guy she's been sent to 1943 to keep safe on a country road. A speeding car nearly runs them down, and Sully, not knowing he's the target of an assassin, insists Beryl stay with him so he can protect her. They travel to a nearby town where Sully convinces Ma, the owner of the overbooked boarding house where they're drinking that beer, I think, where he's staying, to rent Beryl a room for the weekend. And he convinces her by saying that Beryl is his cousin. Okay, here we go. See that your cousin gets settled, Sergeant. Ma directed us toward a broad flight of stairs. Her room is to the right at the end of the hall. Supper's at 6 and not a minute after, Miss Blue. Don't forget your room payment and your ration stamps, young lady. I gripped the handrail and started up the creaky steps, Sully at my side. As soon as we were out of Ma's earshot, I went on the attack. I'm your cousin? Really? Did you want me to tell her you're my wife? Well now, didn't hearing that word on his lips make me tremble? With fear, no doubt. I mean, who in their right mind would want to be shackled to this opinionated, gruff, and so very tall control freak? I squeaked out a no and followed him to a room at the end of a long hallway. $10 for this, Sully said when I opened the door. Looks like you're paying by the inch. No kidding. This wasn't a room, it was a closet with a view. The twin bed took up most of the space with a bureau tucked into one corner and a small nightstand in another. I stepped inside, inhaling a healthy dose of lavender-scented sachet, but Sully put down my suitcase and stood in the doorway, looking at me. What, was he a vampire waiting for an invitation to enter? I've got to go check on my men, he said, gesturing toward one of the two windows. I could see the carriage house where the men were staying through the lacy curtain and the branches of an oak tree right outside. I'll be back for you later. Until then, you stay here. Don't leave this room. That was unexpected. Wait, why? Because someone tried to run you down today. It might have been your husband or lover or some maniac who doesn't like brunettes with great gams. I don't know, and I don't care. I don't want you wandering about giving him another chance. Understood? You're on leave, Sergeant. You can stand down. You're staying put, Beryl, and that's final. Do you understand? My goodness, you sure enjoy telling people what to do. Comes with the territory. He tapped the sergeant stripes on his sleeve. So charming. All right, I'll make a deal with you. I'll stay put if you do too. I mean, what if he comes after you? Oh, what a smirk. Don't worry your pretty head, cousin. I can take care of myself. He left and I plopped onto the bed. The springs squeaked like a nest of mice being stepped on. Oh yes, it was abundantly clear Sergeant Sullivan could take care of himself. And he could take care of me and Ma and everyone else around him, which begged an extremely intriguing question. Why would a man like that need a librarian like me to save him from certain death? And that is the question of the book.
Very good question. Yeah, yeah. And the answer to it is very interesting. In the last few months, I've taken to making sure that I read at least an entire book of each author who is on our program. And I really enjoy that because I get such a better view of the book, the story, the writing. Now, you have, is it 2 or is it 3 books set in the 1940s?
Just 2 right now, but I'm working on the sequel to Beryl Blue, which should be out very soon.
What drew you to World War II?
Well, I grew up in, this is the story I always tell everyone. I grew up in public housing back in the 60s and the 70s, and practically everybody, every dad, I should say, and some of the moms in the neighborhood had been a World War II veteran. You know, they were all veterans. And so there was just like this kind of collective knowledge, and it was all around me. You know, the dads would hoist a drink on D-Day, you know, that type of thing. And so it was always something that was very much in my mind. And that's pretty much how it started. And then I became kind of interested in the history, the time period, and just went right from there.
Very cool. You touch on some of the differences between social codes and mores and expectations of 2015, where Beryl Blue came from, and the 1940s. And, I like the way you went about it, because we hear a lot today about how just bad and wrong every other era was. And I believe every era had its good points. So what do you see as some of the good points of the 1940s and the World War II era?
Oh, that's a tough one, because we were in a war, and it was a really tremendously awful war when you put it all together. The horrible things were happening at that time. I would say probably there was just a real sense of purpose. There was, there were people who were making money on the black market, getting beef and selling it, at big prices and stuff like that. But really, overall, it was a general sense of purpose and people working together. So I would say that's probably the strongest.
Yeah, I think that too. When I read about World War II, it seems that there was so much cohesiveness and unity as a country, whereas now we're very divided.
I think it's because everyone was touched by it in one way or another. Everybody had somebody who was involved.
Right.
Overseas, maybe somebody who was just working in Washington doing something, there was always a connection. And so it was pretty much permeated the culture.
Right. And I think there was that sense of, the Victory Gardens and Rosie the Riveter, and everybody pulled together and work hard, and we're going to help somebody else, and all of that. What is it about time travel that fascinates you?
That is a good question too. Well, I think anybody who loves history usually will be drawn to time travel as well, because it usually involves, going to a historical time period and inevitably trying to fix something. So I try to avoid that in my time travel books, though. It's like, history is fixed. You can't change the past, but that's all about Beryl's journey, is how she's trying to change things. And she really has to learn that hard lesson, But when I was a kid, I used to watch, and you probably know the show called The Time Tunnel.
I never heard of it until I looked at your blog today.
Oh my God, I loved that show when I was a kid. And it was about two guys it was basically Gilligan's Island through time. These two guys went through this tunnel and they got trapped jumping around in time, and they were never able to get off that island. They were stuck in time, even though the people in the time tunnels main office were trying to get them back, so I just love that show. And it got canceled after a year, and so they basically were just jumping around in time forever and ever. So a little bit of a frustration.
I had actually planned on asking you this in the third segment, but it doesn't really matter, and you mentioned it, so I'm going to bring it up.
Okay.
You said time can't be changed, and yet I believe you've written some articles about each episode of Time Tunnel for a site called Time Travel Nexus.
Yes,
and
I did it.
The first thing I found when I went to that site today was about the Mandela effect. And that site was questioning, does the Mandela effect prove that time travel exists? What would be your response to that?
I'm not quite sure what the Mandela effect is, so you'll have to.
Really?
The Mandela effect is one of the best rabbit holes I ever went down.
Is it the one where everybody thinks Mandela died in jail or something like that, or in prison?
And it's because the scientists at CERN are messing with the timeline, and so, but there are remnants in certain people of the alternate timeline that they've changed. And so people have the memories, like how the Berenstain Bears is spelled.
It's a fascinating theory, and if you start looking into it, there's a whole list of things that millions of people say they remember, and yet the proof is there that it didn't happen.
Right.
Outtakes didn't, air quotes, happen.
Right.
So, well, if you didn't know about that, then
I experienced that in my own family. Anyway, I'll say, "Oh, do you remember when such and such happened?" And I'll just get the blank looks from everyone. So it's like, okay, well, maybe that's the Mandela effect. It only happened to me.
Just blame the scientists at CERN, and you're good.
This is a motto to live by for the rest of my life. It wasn't.
They made it so my brother didn't break that window.
Perfect. We are ready for beer number 2.
All right, beer number 2, sticking with the lager theme. We've got Coors Banquet, good old original Coors Banquet. a beer that I really do love. So this one is one of those scenes. You said there's a lot of beer drinking in your books, and this is one of those scenes with a lot of beer drinking. So they're in some sort of a tavern, doing a lot of drinking, and I just was thinking, what are they drinking?
Okay, I'm thinking, what are you doing? You told me I'm gonna hate this and you fill it to the top. What have I done to you?
It's habit. Anyway, what are they drinking? And I started thinking about all these legacy lagers that are out there. So the Pabst Brewing Company is in large part a holding company that has bought up a whole bunch of legacy brands like Schlitz and Blatz and Stroh's and all these beers that used to be regional or local lagers. And then in the great consolidation of the 70s, were bought up and put out of business. But Pabst Brewing Company is re-releasing a lot of these labels in the areas where they were originally produced. So like Stroh's, Valentine, Olympia up in Washington. So they're just all these legacy brands they're bringing out, and it's a really good thing. So I started thinking we need those legacy brands, one of those old lagers. And in the store, I couldn't find one of those, which was disappointing. I wanted Schlitz, that's what I really wanted. But I couldn't find Schlitz, believe it or not. So I went with the best one I could find, which was Coors Banquet. So we got Coors Banquet. Cheers.
Cheers.
How
I
is
think
it?
it's very similar to the previous one.
It's similar, but less malty.
I can taste the difference, definitely. I might like this a little bit more than the previous
Really?
one. Just it's neck and neck. I think I might like it a little bit more.
You shocked me.
I'm probably just lying. So,
Of the- the-
after I asked you, have I ever surprised you? No, I think I do though.
Of the American lagers, Coors leans more to the sweet side. So
Well, that's probably why. That's probably why I like it a little better. We're ready for reading number 2.
All right. Well, I just want to do a quick aside and tell you that Schlitz was my father's beer of choice.
Oh,
all right.
And I just remember when I was a kid, he'd be sitting out on the front stoop with a Schlitz, listening to the Red Sox play, on the radio. So that was one of my strongest memories from childhood. And the Red Sox were losing. And they lost and they lost and they lost until they did. I'm not interested in them anymore once they won. So it was like, liked it when they were losers. Okay, the second one is another one from Beryl Blue, Time Cop. And here's the setup. Beryl goes to a nightclub with several of the soldiers that she's met who are on weekend leave from a nearby army base, including Sully, the gruff sergeant she's sent back to 1943 to protect from Jake, who's the time-traveling assassin. All right, so they're gathered around a table at this nightclub. Beers all around, Sully said to the waitress, with an Old Crow chaser. The lady'll have a sarsaparilla. I choked. Sasso, what? Okay, that pampering the little lady thing could only go so far. Was I made of glass? The hell I will. If you're drinking whatever Old Crow is, Sully, so am I. The others laughed. You tell him, Griff said. Sully's eyebrow rose. I never met a girl who drank whiskey. You think you can keep up with us? Full disclosure, I hate whiskey. I wasn't a big drinker, not even in college, but I wasn't a teetotaler either. I downed enough low-cal beer and dirty martinis to prove that. I could keep up. I do and I will, I said. The waitress left and the men started talking all at once, mostly about the women in the club. I shrugged off my coat, a plaid wool that was probably chic in 1943, but for a modern girl like me screamed grandma's closet. I scanned the place looking for Jake, a tough task. All the men were in motion, circling the tables filled with women like hungry sharks. The women, dressed like me in simple frocks and darling hats, giggled and flirted. Could have been any club, any time period, anywhere in the world, except for the abundance of white faces and World War II style uniforms. Mabel returned with a tray of Pilsner glasses filled with foamy beer and shot glasses containing an amber-colored liquid. Sully ground out his cigarette in an ashtray and eyed me with a shit-eating grin. He lifted the shot glass and knocked back the whiskey in one smooth gulp. Challenge accepted. The old crow burned my throat and made me shudder, but I drank every drop. Sully handed the waitress a couple of bills. When she tried to give him his change, he waved her off. Keep him coming, Mabel, he said, eyeing me, for all of us. I could already feel the whiskey warming my blood. I hoped I could keep up as I bragged. I mean, Sully was a giant, could probably soak up an entire bottle of Old Crow before getting a buzz. I could not. But I nodded with conviction. I'd drink what he drank. Who knew I could be so competitive? Mabel and her tray melted into the crowd, and Stan raised his beer glass. Here's to us, fellas, across the sea in 43. Griff grinned and held his glass higher. Home once more in 44. Marco and Sully chimed in, home alive by 45. Lighthearted toasts mixed with melancholy. Because of the war, the buzzard that circled over them, over everyone in this room and all the people of 1943, never out of sight, never forgotten as everyone went about their lives. I watched them drink, then slam their empty glasses on the table. Home alive by 45, I echoed and drank too, wishing with all my might that such a hopeful toast would come true.
This actually became a very poignant book as she falls in love with Sully and desperately wants to know, did he come back? And she does meet him briefly. I don't want to give any spoilers later in the war.
Right.
But I don't think by the end of the book she finds out, unless I'm forgetting. But she is left with the question, what happened to her?
Yes, yeah. It ends on a cliffhanger. So if you don't like cliffhangers, then it's a 3-book series, which comes to a good middle. There's a good middle, and then the satisfying conclusion at the end. And there's a whole bunch of questions that I asked, and there's some mystery elements to it. So there's all of those will be wrapped up in the 3rd book. But yeah, the 1st book is a cliffhanger, but I think it ends in a fun way. I mean,
I have to admit it's been a couple of weeks since I read it. I don't remember exactly how it ends. Actually, yes, I do. I do remember how it ends. So I did want to go to your biography. I liked where you talked about you decided to start writing at 10, and I like this partly because that's when I started writing.
Were you writing time travel then?
No, this is a funny story. I got about 10 pages into this brilliant novel, and I was 10, but it was brilliant. And it was about a little boy named Timmy who gets kidnapped. And he is such a handful and so obnoxious that his captors try to give him back, and his parents don't want to take him. Now, the funny thing is, I don't know, a few weeks, a month after I started writing my brilliant novel, I was looking at the books on my mother's bookshelf, pulled out one by O. Henry called The Ransom of Red Chief, and read the back and went, he wrote my book.
He stole your idea.
He stole my idea. And, at the age of 10, it didn't really occur to me that just because he and I had the same concept didn't mean I couldn't write my own version.
Exactly.
And then of course you get into the whole thing about there are only 3 plots, there are only 7 plots,
Right.
there are only 37 plots in the whole history of writing. So I'm sure he and I are not the only 2 who have had that concept, but I quit writing it. So yeah, that's what I was writing when I was 10 was my O. Henry version. But your story was for a class assignment, the day my teacher wore a miniskirt to school. I was struck also that you got a C- on it, because that also correlates to my life. In, I think it was 8th grade, I wrote a short story that we had to write for class, and I got a C on it. And I was like, writing is my thing. How come I got a C on it? And Sister Margaret Joanne, I still remember her. She had a full-length black and white habit. And she said, well, because it was too original, I didn't know what to do with it. I went,
Wow.
yeah, that's why I got a C. It was supposed to be about something in the classroom, and I wrote about a tennis shoe, and she's like, well, a tennis shoe goes in and out of the classroom, so it's in the classroom, but then it's not. So
Probably frightened her. It's like too sci-fi for me.
Right. Anyway, I'm dying to know what was the story pure fiction or was it based on an actual incident?
I still have it. It's so, I shouldn't say that because I don't know where it is, but I know it's around because I've seen it recently. It's in one of those blue books, the little blue exam books that we used to write in. And I think I wrote about the teacher wearing a miniskirt, and she was 1,000 years old as far as I was concerned, but she was probably 40.
Right.
And it was shocking. I wrote it as being a shocking thing. And so the principal, I think, fainted. I think that was one of the plot points. She probably was very offended that I just said that people fainted when she was wearing a miniskirt.
So you wrote a story
She
about
didn't have a sense of humor, and maybe I misspelled a word or two, but that was where the C- came from.
So even though she's a minor character in the scene, I was really struck by Mabel, especially as we see her later in the scene. She has a little bit more of a role in this than what we just heard in the reading.
Right. The waitress.
And here again, I think that what we think about previous decades and centuries is not accurate. None of us were there. We see it through our own lens. And the attitudes and behaviors in this scene really kind of strike me. I'm sorry, I'm getting mixed up between two questions. We hear a lot about how oppressed women were in previous decades. And I'm reading this scene to quote Bedazzled, these are not sensitive men of the 90s,
No.
which of course is now a very outdated quote. But Mabel she's like, she doesn't care that they're flirting or suggesting. She's in complete control.
Right. And one of the guys in particular, he gets physical with her. He's like bumping himself against her, and he's like trying to get her to, he's just kind of insinuating things. And I just did it as a throwaway. So it would be like, this is how it was, not to say like, oh, and Beryl she gets a little like, oh, cut it out, but, and Mabel, but she is very much like, yeah.
She's in control.
Buzz off.
And so I'm curious, do you think that Mabel is an anomaly for the 40s, or do you think that she was typical of a woman of the 40s?
I think she was typical. I think women have always been bothered by that kind of thing, and it's like, especially a woman who's a waitress in a bar, I mean, there's always been that from time since time began, and so, but I think that, we tend to forget, these women, went and put ships together in 24 hours. They were, working and having families and stuff like that while they were working. So they were just as tough. And there's that whole image of the 1950s, Mrs. Cleaver in the house with the, and there were mothers like that. But even back then, post-war, when all the women, a lot of them lost their jobs so that the men could have the jobs. I don't know what the percentage was, but it was still a high percentage of American women were in the workforce. So it's not like we've always been, this is new. Something's new, so.
I have one last question for this segment.
Sure.
Actually, I have like 4 or 5, but we have a time limit. I've watched The Patriot multiple times. And so, it's kind of our tradition on the 4th of July to watch it. And I thought this year, let's watch something new. So I looked for a list of all the movies about the Revolutionary War. And I'd say even going back to like practically the first years of filmmaking, I could only find about a dozen, if that. And I was thinking, I'm curious what your thought is. Why does a war like World War II get so much attention, or the Civil War? There are thousands of books and movies about those two. There's not so much about World War I or the Revolutionary War. Why do you think some incidents in history attract more attention?
That is a good question. And I've always been attracted more to the home front aspect of it. And you don't see a lot of that, it's
true.
more about the battles. And I hate to say it, it was a Studs Terkel who wrote a book called The Good War. And it was about World War II. And it was a facetious title. He did it facetiously because in the book, he talks about, how horrible things were. And but people kind of took that to heart, and then the Tom Brokaw, The Greatest Generation too. I think a lot of people tend to sort of idealize how it was for Americans in particular. Because, if you were in Europe, it was a mess, there was some tough stuff going on over there.
Yes.
So, and also in the South Pacific, I mean, it was just bad, but,
well,
yes.
and that's, I find myself, like I said, this is what I'm reading, nice light reading this week, and it's about World War II. And I find myself drawn over and over to movies about World War II. So I am too, there was so much going on. It was all over, it was in Asia, it was South Pacific, it was Europe.
And a lot of that stuff was known and reported on by newspapers, but it was more, in the US in particular, people were just like, well, we're not going to really look at that. It was less, we're here, we're safe, we're in the US, we don't have to even think about that.
Right.
But the extent of some of the atrocities, particularly the Nanking thing, really didn't come out until the 80s and the 90s. So,
yes. As I said, I highly recommend everyone watch Flowers of War. And there's also a fascinating book called The Feet Say Run that, and I'm biased because I published the book, but I published it because I thought it was so good, so well written. And it talks about World War II as seen through the eyes of a Nazi, but from his whole life, from the time he was 13 until he's in his dying days. And it's a fascinating look at it from a very different perspective.
Right.
And we are like 2 minutes over time, and we're on a tight time limit here. So we're ready for beer number 3.
Beer number 3. All right. I just got to say, I had a moment of questioning the writer's research in your last reading. When you had that quote about locale beers. And it really was a moment of beer nerd idiocy. I said to myself, well, locale beers didn't exist then.
But they did in 2015.
And then I went, duh, it's a time travel story.
Don't worry. I have to say that Beryl in the story gets confused several times herself.
Okay, so it's not just me.
She has to remember where she is and what kind of slang that she's using,
Having grown up in the military, I actually feel like that sometimes, like, wait, am I still in Washington? I've moved so much. Anyway, beer number 3.
Oh, beer number 3. Okay, so this next reading involves a Japanese attack in World War II. And so I thought, sticking with the lager theme, a Japanese lager. So we have Sapporo Premium. I love the Japanese lagers because they tend to be really light and crisp and dry.
It sounds like something I might like.
Maybe you're surprising me today. So.
Well, I've surprised you once.
So anyway, Japanese lager.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm a little bit undecided. There are things I do like about it.
This one is more bitter than the others.
It's a little bit, I would say drier, but I'm not a beer expert. That's an interesting taste. Once again, I'm going to go with, I don't hate it.
That's very unique.
It's special. No, again, if it were a really hot day, I would drink this. It's not going to be at the top of my list, but I would drink it. I think on a really hot day, it would actually be good. Some of the heavier beers wouldn't.
You like sushi?
So,
well,
I thought you knew me.
You got to drink that.
Love
you got to drink this with sushi. You got to have a Japanese lager with sushi.
I will. Okay. It's in the notes. With sushi. We were just at Cloud9 up in Duluth on Sunday, and they poured us a different hot sake than they normally do. And it was real like tangy and tart, which the other one that they always have isn't. So maybe I'll ask them for a Japanese lager next time. So reading number 3.
Okay. Well, this reading is from a different book, which is a lot more serious than Beryl Blue Time Cop. It's called A Moment After Dark. And it's set in World War II. It's paranormal suspense. And I just found out, actually, just before I joined you, that it was nominated for a Silver Falchion Award from, thank you, it's the Killer Nashville Conference, Writers Conference that they have every year, Mystery Conference. They have this whole award ceremony for the best books of the year. So I've been nominated, and Beryl Blue was also nominated. So it was a nice 1-2 punch. So anyway, A Moment After Dark is it's about a woman who has the ability to see the future, and by the touch of objects, she can see. If she touches a person or she touches an object, she can see the future. And so basically, this is the opening scene. I don't want to go too much further into it. Here's my tagline, though. She sees the future with a touch, a powerful gift in a time of war. The enemy wants her. The allies need her. Okay, Monday, December 1st, 1941. Addie Brandt dragged a stool close to the coffin and studied the man lying peacefully inside. Now, what can I do for you, Mr. Gallagher? She murmured. Not much, she feared. Old Gallagher was no John Barrymore, not even Lionel Barrymore with his basset hound looks. Addie retrieved the makeup basket Mother had given her the Christmas before she died. Try as she might with her paints and powders, she probably wouldn't be able to make Johnny Gallagher any less unattractive in death than he had been in life. That irked her. She'd been fond of the man. He wasn't like the others. He didn't stare or run away when he saw her. He'd always given her a kind smile when they met. For that, she owed him a face as handsome as Errol Flynn for his funeral. She perched on the stool and got to work. Soon finished, she combed Mr. Gallagher's few wisps of gray hair, then reached for a small box on the counter. The box opened with a soft click, and Addie took out a tie pin. She gasped as icy cold latched onto her fingers, shivered up her arm, and spread through her veins like a living thing. Her breath caught. No. Dear Lord, please, no. Her silent plea went unheeded as the strange power that lived deep within her took hold of her waking mind. 1,000 needles stabbed her brain. Her vision narrowed as if she were thundering backward in a train tunnel. Then the world went black and she plummeted into the gaping abyss of the sight. A moment later, the darkness peeled away, like sections of an orange breaking off until she looked up at a sky so blue it stung her eyes. She could taste its sharpness. She smelled warm sea air mixed with hot metal, oil, gunpowder. Sleepy voices surrounded her, men just waking up. Heat baked her skin and shimmered off steel walls joined together with silver rivets. An angry buzz droned overhead. Addie squinted into the sun as a swarm of metal locusts came into view. What in hell? A man's rough voice came out of her own mouth. Airplanes. They flew in formation, 10, 12, maybe more. Sunlight glinted off their wings. The first wave broke off and swooped in. The buzz became a roar. An explosion rattled Addie's bones. She staggered. Smoke billowed, choking her. Men screamed and shouted in confusion and panic. Pain. A man in a once white Navy uniform, now covered with soot, pounded up, his face twisted in terror. Jimmy, it's the Japanese, he cried, and scurried away. Jimmy. Addie had slipped into the skin of a man named Jimmy on a ship somewhere, choking on smoke so thick with oil she could almost touch it, strangling on her own fear. One thought pushed through the chaos. I've got to man my gun. She plowed through the smoke, her shoes beating the deck. Another explosion, like the fury of hell blasting open. The ship heaved as if a giant hand scooped it up, then dropped it into the water again. She fell with a thud onto the deck. Heat seared her palms, scorched through her trousers and singed the skin off her knees. Nearby, a man wearing a suit of flames leapt overboard. She managed to stand. She shaded her eyes from the glare and looked up. A plane dove through the smoke, the red circle of Japan like an angry eye on its side. Mother Mary, she prayed. Staccato flashes of machine gun fire cut through the noise. Hot beads of metallic hail pinged the deck. 1,000 knives of fire pierced her chest. And then nothing. That's a cheery little thing, huh?
You know, and I would recommend, I believe on your site, you have the entire section. You've cut out a few lines.
Yes.
There was some really clear things I noticed when I went, I think it's at your author website, at your blog. Yes. And read the whole thing. So there's a little bit more to it, although you chose really well which lines cut out. So, you know, but I love the vivid and the very original ways of describing things and
Thank you.
references to the time, like Errol Flynn. Now, I found it really interesting. Just a couple months ago, we had Marion McCarthy on, And her book was called Murder and the Mortician, about a mortician who can speak to the dead. So it was really interesting that all of a sudden we have another mortician with paranormal experiences. What kind of put this idea in your head of a mortician having premonitions from the dead?
Well, first of all, she is the child of morticians. So she's 22, and she's been doing this job since her mother died. She paints the dead. So she doesn't do any of the other stuff, which is like, as you were saying, was one of the lines I cut out. She doesn't do the stuff that her uncle has to do.
Right.
So she just does the painting and whatever. But and I can't even tell you where this story came from. It just, that first scene just burst into my mind, and it just came right out onto the page. So
I know the experience. That's part of how one of my novels started. It was just there, this obnoxious guy gambling away his livelihood and conning his girlfriend into pawning her grandmother's heirloom ring. And it was just there. It's like he just existed in my mind. And then other things came in. So I get it.
That is one of the best things about writing, I think, is when that happens. Sometimes like Beryl Blue took a little bit more work, to come up with all the little elements, especially in the opening. But this was just like that, and you just love it. You have to follow it.
So I have to tell you, I also like this because of kind of some of it. Pearl Harbor has had a little bit of an interesting place in my life, because my house in Bremerton, Washington, I kind of jokingly say, if I stood on tiptoe on the deck and leaned way out, I could have actually seen the USS Missouri, because my house looked down on the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard where it was parked.
Oh.
And then, just by amazing dumb luck, it sailed out to Pearl Harbor when Hawaii stole it from us. Not that I'm bitter. I'm much more bitter than this beer, truth be told. But if they had to steal it from us, at least I got to be in the big band that was playing on the dock. We were playing Old Lang Syne as they sailed out. And so, there's another connection to the USS Missouri. And then the third is that my son was a Marine, once a Marine, always a Marine. He still is a Marine, but he's out now. But he was stationed in Hawaii the whole time. So I went to visit him, and his brother that I took along wanted to go to Pearl Harbor. And so it's kind of funny, because it's not like something I'm interested in, and yet it kind of keeps pushing its way back into my life. And I'm kind of curious, what drew you to Pearl Harbor? Was there anything?
I've never been. My husband actually made a joke once, because he was talking about going to Hawaii, and I was like, I'm from New England. I like cold water. I was like, I'm not really interested in that. And he said, I have 2 words for you: Pearl Harbor. So that might get me to go to Hawaii. But I really just used this as the avenue for this story to get going. Whereas if it was like she saw D-Day, or she saw some other, or some disaster that happened, it wouldn't have as much power, because this was the beginning. This is what sucked the U.S. into the war, officially anyway. And so that's why I used the Pearl Harbor incident as the stepping off point. And go ahead.
I have, one or two, depending, more questions. I'm assuming that you, just like I've never been in a medieval battle, but I describe them in my books very vividly, I think. I'm assuming you've never been on a ship under attack. From above. No, not too often anyway. But you described it very, very vividly. I mean, the smells and the sights and what it is, the emotions being in the middle of this, even to the detail of, you notice that this is just a boy coming up the stairs. Where does this vision come from? How do you put yourself in a scene to experience something that you've never experienced?
Well, I time travel, actually. I'm hanging out with the people at CERN. I do a lot of reading, and also I like to go and see things that I could say that a lot of what this scene came from was, there's a ship, and of course the name is going to escape me, but it's parked in Boston Harbor, near the USS Constitution, Old Ironsides, and it was in World War II, and it was hit by a kamikaze. And I've toured that ship several times. Usually when you try to tour the Constitution, there's so many people in line, you know, you can just go to this other ship. And I wish I could remember the name of it. But anyway, and I've toured it several times. And so, you know, when I've been on it, it's like, what does it smell like? What do the walls feel like of the ship? You know, the rivets, you can just feel the rivets. And so I try to internalize all of that whenever I do any research. And we took a trip recently to, before, in the olden days, before COVID, we took a trip with the National World War II Museum to Europe, and we did the Band of Brothers tour. So we followed the people who were the Band of Brothers series, the real people. We followed their trip through the war, through Europe. And so everywhere I went along that, it was like, what can I touch? You know, what can I smell? You know, how would they have felt? You know, if it was a hot day when, you know, during the trip, how did they feel with the uniform on and everything? So I just try to put myself, be as empathetic as possible into the character. So
we are unfortunately out of time. What are your links? Where can people find you online?
Well, Janet Raye Stevens .com, and it's Ray with an E and Stevens with a V. And you can get me from there. You know, Twitter and everything else is connected from there. So just go on there, and if you want, sign up for my newsletter. I don't send out too many, but it's a lot of fun. When I do send it out, I usually do some kind of World War II trivia and things like that. And
that sounds like fun.
I have a lot of fun with it.
So Michael, where are we? Where are you?
I am at aperfectpint.net. And if you want to look at social media that I haven't touched for a couple of years, A Perfect Pint. We are booksandbrews.net, Book and Brews on Instagram, which I also haven't touched in a couple of years, and Books and Brews with Laura Vosica and Michael Agnew on Facebook that Laura touches every once in a while.
I'm trying to do it more often. Yeah, I'm trying.
Thank you for hosting me today. This has been a lot of fun. This is my first podcast ever. So
oh, really?
I wish I had cracked a beer for that, you know.
Yeah.
You should have.
Yeah, you should
have one when we're done, or maybe some Old Crow.
I'm kind of lost in where we are. My links.
Where are you?
I mean, you gave me 3 full glasses of beer.
I noticed you're not driving home. So.
That's right. You're taking full advantage. Yeah, Chris will hopefully be back sometime. He had to run my son over to home, which hopefully the traffic's not too bad. I am at lauravosica.com or bluebellschronicles.com. And where else? I'm on Instagram, Laura_Vosica, which I basically never go to. I'm on all kinds
really
of
bad
things.
social media people.
I know. I should not hire myself out to do social media. You know, I really can't remember where I am. I'm just on, I don't really have my own Twitter anymore. I go under Gabriel's Horn Books, BKS on Twitter. Any upcoming events that you want your readers to know about, Janet?
I will be in Trumbull, Connecticut on July 16th for Romanticon.
Trumbull, Connecticut.
The one day romance readers event.
Okay, we'll put that up on our website. Michael, should I even bother asking?
No need.
Yeah, I have no events.
Hit the bar.
Right, except that Gabriel's Horn is accepting submissions for Startled by Laughter. It is for new poetry in traditional styles. And, you know, I just have to say, this guy next door has gone in and out like 50 times. It's really distracting.
At least his 3-year-old son isn't running around naked.
Oh, that happens sometimes. Well, his dog wasn't exactly dressed. The dog was in and out quite a bit too. And then the wife, I mean, who do these people think they are?
All right, seeing we're pressed for time, who do we have next time?
I'll say it really fast. Nancy Laird Young is the author of Tea with Dad, Finding Myself in My Father's Life, a memoir of her life with her 90-year-old career military father. She loves travel, gardening, and just like Janet, tea.
All right.
Tea is good. I love tea too. So that sounds exciting. We look forward to that. Janet, I want to thank you for joining us today and sharing your insights and your words. This has been Books and Brews, episode number 40. Cheers.
Cheers.